Alright, so I want to go over the brine. This is the next day. So when you make a batch of brine, you don't want to use the whole gallon of it to brine your chicken. You want to get a small enough container that you can use the proper amount of brine based on the size of the chicken. Well, you can just smell that coming out of there. So here's our breast. We're going to rinse these off, okay? And then we're going to put it on those paper towels right there and dry them off. I made a gallon of brine, and here's the rest of it. So once it's been chilled, you could put this in like Ziploc bags and you can freeze it, or you can use it in the jar, you know what I mean, just like pour it, and for the next week it would be good to brine other chickens, other meat. So once you've used the brine though, you don't want to reuse it for another set of meat. Right, so just use the proper amount to cover the meat that you have. So for these two breasts, I'm going to rinse off the chicken now. And this gets any of that salt off of it. We're going to season it before we cook it. We're just going to let these dry off. We'll discard this used brine. And basically, the brine, it breaks down the fibers in the meat, and it penetrates it, so it's really moist when you cook it. I'll show you how I cook it later, but basically, when you cook it, you're going to cook it to an internal temperature. You know, the USDA says like 164. If you cook it to 164, it's just going to be real stringy and hard. So I like to do mine around 148 to 150 and then let it rest. And what I mean let it rest is when you cook the meat, it gets real hot and everything expands when things get hot. And if you slice it when it's hot, right after you cook it, all that moisture is just going to run out of the meat. You want the muscle fiber to contract, chill down, and draw that moisture back in, so that when you cut it, you can see that it's still wet along the edge of where you cut, instead of just running out on the plate. So your chicken's nice and tender. Also, when you cut your chicken breast, okay, you don't want to cut it. See how these grains are going like this? You don't want to cut it like this. You want to cut it against the grain. So you might slice it in half here and then slice it in this direction. So you cut across the grain so that when you bite into it, it falls apart. It's more tender instead of getting long strings of meat in your mouth. So I'll show you that later. Again, so we dry this off real good, and then we'll put it back in the refrigerator and till we're ready to cook it. And then right before we cook it, maybe 30 minutes, we'll pull it out and let it come up to room temperature. We'll season it with a little bit of salt and pepper, and then we'll cook it. There's lots of ways to cook it. Sous vide is a good way. And sous vide basically means under vacuum. So if you vacuum seal this and put it in an immersion cooker, you can set it to 140, 145, and cook it till it's, you know, the internal temperature is close to being done. Not all the way done. Don't cook it to 150. And then take it out in a pan, in a hot pan. And then you can, because your chicken breast is going to look white, and then sear it real hot on a hot pan, like a smoking hot pan, to give it color on all the sides. And then when you slice it, it'll be perfect after it rests. Or you can just cook it in the pan, you know, about 4 minutes on one side, flip it over, cook it 4 minutes, 2-3 minutes on the other side, baste it with some butter, let it rest, and then cut it that way. Skinless and boneless is kind of the toughest to cook. With the skin on, I like it the best, but my wife won't eat the skin, so I have to do it like this. So she'll eat it. We're making a avocado chicken salad tonight, and hopefully I can show you some of that. But this is the brining process, plus some extra information that you may not want to know, but now you do. Take care.